Yeah, I should say, by the way, that just before we connected, that I ran over the road to my local cafe to get a sandwich, and I've got a bit of bread stuck in my teeth that I can't get out. So
Yeah.
if anyone's listening to this thinking what's up with James's voice, then it's because there's a bit of bread in my teeth. Can you see the bread in my teeth?
It looks like you might have a missing tooth, so maybe, yeah.
like a like a pirate.
Yeah.
Um, it's wicked to speak to you, man. The last time, I mean, you might not remember, but the last time that we were together, we were doing like a. I was working at NME, and we were doing like an NME radio kind of round table thing,
Right.
and you told some story that I can't repeat because I still can't believe you actually said it on the radio. But it was about some
What was
dinner
it?
party you held, and I have to say I've told friends about that many times over the years. But it was
Cannot remember what you're talking about at all. This is can you give me a clue?
there was blood involved.
Oh, no, it was a New Year's Eve party. Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, how many dinner parties do you hold, Patrick?
It involved making Irish stew as well, right? I think.
I think
And
so.
blood in the yeah, I remember. Okay.
That's not the detail that I've honed in on. But listen, let's not worry too much about that. But no, you're back. That's bonkers. I kind of want to be really frivolous and say where have you been, but I sort of know a bit where you've been, and it sounds like it was rubbish.
Well, I guess that's up for debate. It's someone's perspective, I guess. I haven't really started to work out. This is my first interview in about 7 years, or maybe even longer than that. I think that I did a very small like phone promotion thing for a tour I did in Australia to the Guardian. That lasted about 5 minutes. I haven't done anything in depth and have retreated into quite a private uh, life. And I think that I'm still really a little cautious to start talking about like what's happened in the last 10 years. Cautious in that like I'm a little scared of losing what I have right now, and so much of that is a very private and quiet life. But I went and did a stupid thing and released a record, and what comes with that is starting to open up about your whys and your wheres and all that stuff. So I'm gonna say I'm like recalibrating. So this might be like a recalibration interview. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
listen. Let me tell you a bit where I'm coming from. So I'm currently writing a book about my. I have obsessive compulsive disorder, and it's made my life very difficult. So I'm currently writing a book about it, and it's very close to. I'm very close to sending the manuscript to my publisher. So
Congratulations.
basically, my life at the moment is like, let me tell you about my trauma.
Yeah.
So I've become very like, I don't really understand why I have ended up at. Well, I do understand, but it's very strange to me that I've ended up at a time in my life that, I always feel as a journalist, kind of like showing yourself is kind of like a bit of a strange move, really, because
It's almost the opposite of your job description, isn't it? In a way, yeah.
absolutely you don't want to be the story, right? So, but I've sort of ended up at a point where I'm like, how have I arrived at a point where I am about to tell strangers about a period of my life that I was obsessed that people thought I was a paedophile or that I was HIV positive and was so confused by gender dysphoria that I was obsessed that my bones were too big, right? So it's
Mm.
like it's properly, and not that I've ever been an especially private person, but it's definitely been like a ramping up a gear. So if I basically, if I don't want to pry at all, like I read you say, I think there was a Guardian thing you did where you said that you weren't really ready to kind of talk about certain things because you didn't, you sort of like, there was no point in doing that unless you actually had like the music to sort of show with it. Like you wanted something beautiful to go with it. So,
Exactly, and I guess that interview, I really wanted all this time away. I wanted first of all for if you see on my Instagram post when I talk about a new single, I say, I'm going to let the work speak for me. And that's quite a radical thing for me because normally there's like a kind of like 2-page essay before people hear anything. And as I've grown into the writer I am now and the artist I am now, like I really want the work to start speaking in a way, the work to be the jewel at the end of the mining, and so I'm really trying to take a very disciplined approach in letting the work have some breathing time for people to find their own space through it, first of all, because I think ultimately there are some quite hardcore life experiences behind these songs. And I think it would be a shame for me to cloud them with personality, ego, or story, but or personal story. But I'm reaching a point now where I realize that at a certain point, your growth can be of service to other people, and that's probably, it sounds like, where you're at. You're, and that's a really magical thing. And I look at other people that can do that, and I think it's like it's coming. It might even happen in this interview, but I'm just, I was out in the garden today and just looking at my 2 cats being hyperactive in the garden, and this kind of very quiet. I went for a run in the cemetery. Like, social media is there, but you can close it down. Like, Patrick Wolf does not exist in my daily life, at all. And I'm kind of inviting him back into my consciousness in a way by doing this EP and all that stuff. So yeah.
Well, listen, like, this is definitely not the Piers Morgan show, right? So, like, if there's anything,
I would be ready.
Yeah, just shut me down if I pry too much.
Oh no, it's fine.
I guess one of the things I find with the podcast, like my wife, she manages bands and she manages We Are Scientists. Lovely lads, very funny lads. And I did an episode with them the other day, and I was really happy with it. But beforehand, I was like, I hate interviewing We Are Scientists because, it's all jokes, right? It's just funny, and my thing has always been like, who hurt you? My thing's always been like, tell me about school. So
you are Oprah, definitely. Yeah. Were you silenced or were you silent? Is it that way around? I'm not sure.
I actually think I got a little bit more out of them because of it, but at the same time, there was a little moment where I was like, have I split this band up? There's a few moments where I think they were both a bit surprised by how much they were bearing. But do you think though that, I mean, I followed your music, like, well, I've been aware of you like since fanzine days, like when I was doing a fanzine, and aware of Minty, and I was a big Kinnicky fan and all that stuff. So,
were you upstairs at the garage?
Well, this is it. First time I was in a band for a bit, and first time my band played upstairs at the garage, it felt like I was playing Wembley. It was like,
yeah, me too.
This is hallowed turf. So, I've known of you and been a fan of your music for a long time. Do you think that, I don't know, like, do you think people view you as like an exotic beast? It's like people want to know about you. Do you, I mean, it might be a bit of a weird thing to answer, but do you feel like that?
I have felt like that in the past. Oh, definitely. In the life I've set up for myself now, like my driving instructor, is like my biggest. I let him in on, like, I'm doing an interview today, and he's like really excited and fascinated. And I kind of like the life that I have now is far from exotic. It's very grounded, and so I don't experience that kind of lens of fascination, in my day-to-day life. And I don't think I could healthily invite it back in again. But I do remember, definitely. Well, the thing is, it was a game, I think, that I really enjoyed playing for a while. And in the end, if you go back to the first album, it's very much, even in the liner notes, it's, I just wanted to kind of exploit my personal life to point. I wanted, if you ask me any question, I would answer it about relationship or past trauma. It was like a bit of a trauma dump, professionally for a long time. And I think the repercussions really, set in towards the end. And, the last 10 years has been, in a way, healing from that, I think. So yes, definitely there was a long time where I felt like a exotic beast, but I also felt like one too. That's the thing. Like it was definitely an exchange of energies going on between me and the press, I think.
I mean, with you, the sort of the hiatus, if for want of a better term, like because you started out so young,
Mm.
do you feel a little bit like maybe you missed out on that quote unquote normality, and actually your time away maybe helps you establish some of that?
The thing is, I never wanted normality. I was never craving that at all. I wanted extraordinary. And from, the moment I left school at 16, I wanted a life that was something I did just dream of. I thought I deserved it, and I did deserve it in the end, for better or worse. Yeah, I never wanted a normal life. The whole escape of the music industry, the idea of joining a traveling circus and having no home and endless possibility and just being kind of abducted by a fascinating beast. Really, that's really what the mission was from the age of 16 onwards. Really, so. But it meant it. But what it meant is that there are some wonderful. As I've learned, there are some brilliant things about the real world in terms of um, uh, psychotherapy. Little things like normal things that people do that if I had just checked in every now and again, like it could have, I could have probably had both. And I think that's the thing now. I find my escape through my work and my writing and that other world I create through, the videos I'm making at the moment or the artwork when it comes around to producing something to share with the world. That's my escape. The whole industry side of it, this whole media side, which I haven't even started. This is my first interview. Um, is I've lost my train of thought. There you go. Okay.
No, no, I understand what you're saying. I mean, well,
Hmm.
I think I do anyway. I mean, do you feel like? I mean, really, is this about? I mean, I don't want to sound like Freud or something, but does
Go for it.
is I'm not. It's really weird. People with OCD are sort of not fond of people like Freud because
Right.
we think it's all a bit sort of wishy washy, really. When we're a little bit like, just let's fix the mechanics. That's a bit
Is
more
it
where
is
we're
it
at.
almost like it gives too much power to the internal dialogue? Is that what happens with the Freud
Well,
and
it's weird.
OCD?
It's weird actually. I did an episode the other day with someone who was telling me about Carl Jung, and Carl Jung's another one that I'm like, like the thing with OCD is if you have obsessions or ruminations or things that you're scared of or irrational fears or intrusive thoughts or whatever, like the worst thing you can do is almost go, well, what's this about? It's actually just more like, oh, your brain isn't working properly. Like,
Mm.
so actually, when you start getting into, well, this is because, which I think a lot of, psychotherapy, that's where it comes from. It can sort
Mm.
of send you down a kind of a bit of a blind alley, really. But I think that without wanting to sound too, come and lie on the couch, is this more about like connecting with Patrick Apps as opposed to Patrick Wolf?
For like a long time, like the if a friend mentioned Patrick Wolf, I would shudder. Definitely. It was just because the the kind of what I would my whole body was crying out for was for if you and to put this in context, like for people that have no idea about my my work, it was like from the age of 18 for the next decade, it was back to back album and tour, and there were like 5 6 albums in that time, and so in a way the person I was at 18 kind of froze and was, and was, yeah, I joined the circus, but also invented the circus that I was going into. So it was like this kind of imaginary world I lived in for about 10 years, you know, and then came crashing out of the other side. And so I think when I came to, what's, you know, when I came to trying to rebuild a life that actually was functioning and healthy and fruitful creatively, I've actually spent the I've had to re-engage with Patrick Wolf as a kind of an internal object, they call it. You know, it's like this, and it's started very distant, and now it's kind of um, it's come back to life. You know, it is the metaphor is so tired, but it's a Frankenstein's monster, you know.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that for those first 10 years. It wasn't my creation, it was me, you know. So now I see it a lot more from a distance, and I think I can actually do better work that way. That's the thing.
Do you, well, the first thing I want to say is obviously don't drown any little girls, because that didn't work out too well for Frankenstein. But did you, do you feel a little bit, I mean, do you recognise the kind of world you're kind of returning to? Because I guess, you know, without being like, hey, Patrick, let's talk about sexuality, like, you were not in a field of one, but like what you were doing within that era was, there wasn't loads of it about. And like, we're in, that sounds terrible, there wasn't loads of it about. But like, you're coming to a place now where there are people who have followed in your footsteps.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel, how do am I off base there? Am I sounding incredibly heterosexual?
The part about there was a lot of it about sounds a bit like coronavirus or something.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah,
But
it does, doesn't it?
it's fine. It's fine. The you know, there's again a little bit.
I guess what I'm trying to, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, sorry, I'm
Oh, by
going
the
to.
way, I was joking there. I have a very dry.
No, no,
I
no,
don't have
I definitely have to quantify it.
like the thing is like it's for me it's a little bit like currently I'm 6'5". I never realized how tall I am until I meet someone taller than me. Like I'm so unaware of my sexuality on a day-to-day level. Like it's um and actually I think the way that the music industry is right now is that I actually might be able to be less aware of it because people won't constantly be telling me about it because as you
Yeah,
say
that's
there's
what I mean.
a lot more of it about, which is kind of a great relief for me. Actually, it means that you know it for you know if we look at the first two albums, there was this clear lycanthropy. It was, you know, debut album by singer-songwriter, experimental, electronic producer, blah, blah, Wind in the Wires, folktronic, whatever the hell that means. But, you know, and then the moment that I did an interview when I was like old enough for people to start picking away at things like sexuality, not that I was ever closeted or repressed in any way, but because as being the sole producer and writer and multi-instrumentalist, for the beginning part, all people had time to do was ask me about instruments, production, and there's a, you know, it's a real cornucopia of things going on in my albums. So, but the moment the sexuality came into the public conscious, well, the media consciousness, is it eclipsed everything else. And so, for third album onwards, it was gay musician Patrick Wolf. Apart from in slightly more developed countries at the time, America, it would be composer, singer, songwriter, you know. And these prefixes might sound trivial to people that aren't, you know, beleaguered by them. They can be exhausting when you've put so much work in. And actually, the thing that I wouldn't say it's the least interesting at all in people, but fundamentally, I believe my work as a producer and songwriter and all the other things that I do was far more interesting. But because of the culture and the time, that's actually what my sexuality was far more interesting to people. So,
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting in the sense that, you know, when I first started talking about my OCD, I started getting, and this is no diss on PRs, you know, or anyone kind of working in the industry. I mean, it's a tough gig, but you know, I would get pitched acts that would be like, oh well, they've recently been diagnosed with ADHD or they're bipolar, and they want to talk about this. And it was always a bit of a strange thing for me, I guess, because it feels really crass to pitch things like that. But also, I sort of felt like the normalization of this stuff, the kind of actually thinking what I would have really needed when I was a teenager, kind of almost makes you want to champion that stuff. Not champion the illnesses, but actually champion the sort of like the taboo breaking. But at the same time, almost like actual change comes where it's like not on the agenda. So I think that what I was really saying is that, do you feel in your limited time back that people haven't said, so how are you feeling about your sexuality these days? Or is the hope that that will be the case now?
It might sound trite, but I really don't care. I've really evolved, I think, um, spiritually, aesthetically, consciously, to really think that um, to see my work through the product of your limited view on life is your path of growth. Like, I'm not going to react to it. Like, I have no reason to react to it or to, so much. And, I was thinking about this, like, there was this time as we were driving in the car, and there was a Canadian scientist, Canadian, what do you call someone that discovers planets?
Like an astronomer?
Astronomer, that's the word. A Canadian astronomer, and he was talking about this new planet that was just been discovered, but he was Canadian and he was speaking in a Canadian accent, and my brain started thinking about all the friends I haven't spoken to from Canada, like an ex-boyfriend from Canada. Like, I went into that and I was thinking, oh, I love Canada so much. I really should, make sure I go there to visit. And then I was focused so much on the fact I love Canada that I completely ignored his message about the planet, And I think so much of that has happened with people that are given the prefixes of gay or black or minority, prefixes, is that unfortunately a lot of the time you're being diverted as the public away from the message.
Well, I was going to kind of come there, but I wondered whether it was something that I was almost entitled to say.
But let me just say one more thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes the message is the minority as well. Sometimes the message is the sexuality. Some artists, they are almost culturally politically, trying to make change by making, really exaggerating that part lyrically or visually. And that's also brilliant too. I'm just talking about this kind of line of work that I've done where specifically as a singer-songwriter, you are a storyteller, and I think that, again, people are focusing on this, well, the song, no, the singer, not the song, the storyteller, not the story kind of, element. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's almost like that thing I was saying about journalism, is that actually centering yourself is, sometimes not completely advantageous to actually what you're supposed to be doing. But I think that, I guess the follow-up for that, and like I say, I'm saying this gingerly because I'm not really sure whether it's really my place to say, but do you feel like we've made progress? I guess my slight suspicion about, kind of identity politics, or a lot of what quote unquote liberalism has become, is that actually, by being so desperate to put people into boxes, I wonder how progressive that actually is.
Oh, hang on, is my microphone still working?
Yeah, you've gone a little bit quiet, but I wondered whether that's just because
there we go. Okay.
You were flawed by my inquisitive nature.
Blown away completely. Do I think that progress has been made? Maybe a year ago I would have said yes, and I feel in a way the world is spinning backwards at the moment, and I can't quite put a finger on why. and in a way, it makes me want to step away and retreat further down the Kent coast, and go to the empty beaches and disconnect more. But as I said, I've just released a record, and part of that is you kind of consciously engaging with the world again. So I'm in a kind of period of observation, but I don't believe that. Well, like all things, um, progress is made and then chipped away at and then made again.
What's made you think that though?
I think recently I've been observing the culture war towards trans transgender people, and kind of the scapegoating that I think skips every generation, like every generation, to a different culprit, really. And I think for a while there was a bit of a lull, I believe, and I think recently, something in the last 4 years, for me, if I don't agree with something, I don't need to fight it. And I feel recently that's the idea of us cohabiting on this planet um, seems to be like an unpopular idea. It seems that everybody wants to, not everybody, but there's a lot of stones thrown unnecessarily, I think, at the moment.
I feel a little bit like if we could just find the mainframe of the internet and smash it up. I think a lot of these. I just think the world would be allowed to, heal in lots of ways. And I mean, I bloody love the internet, right? But I feel a little bit like that's what's kind of forged these divisions, because so often I just think that we're trying to have really complicated conversations about freedoms and rights that don't really work when there's like a mysterious algorithm guiding
That
the conversation.
the algorithm, like we need to do some collective incantation to
Absolutely.
to bring it back in line um, with wholesome human consciousness.
Yeah, absolutely. You were saying about spirituality before. This podcast is a big fan of spirituality. What
Right.
did you mean by that?
In what context did I say it? I forget things that I just said. I can't
It
remember.
was a bit about your kind of growth and kind of your time away.
Uh,
I wondered how literal it was, really.
well, I would say that spirituality is a very as spirituality. I don't mean religious at all, but um, it's for me a connection with a reconnection with the earth, with my music, with um, wonder, a sense of wonder in life, which I lost for a long time. And for me, it's in the falling in love with other people's art and the possibility of creativity. And it doesn't necessarily mean um, sitting in front of an altar of crystals and black candle wax,
Yeah,
but it's for me, my move out to the sea was realizing that in order to continue living in a way that was the way I wanted to, then I would have to be surrounded by a sense of wonder again. And for me, the the seeking of that is a spiritual act.
yeah, yeah. Are you surprised that people? I mean, that London show sold out so quickly. Are you surprised that this your audience has waited?
I think there are like two parts of my brain. One of them saying no one wants to come, and the other part's going is calling up the booking agent and saying book the show, people will come. So it's a battle of the two, the two. And when the tickets went on sale, I tried to step away, but uh, from any news, but it came in pretty quickly that that it had sold out. So every London show I've done in that absence. So my absence hasn't been completely hiding in a cave. I have done a couple of shows here and there. They've all sold out very, very quickly. So I kind of knew, but it's always in life now I lower my expectations so not to experience disappointment. And I was very surprised in the end. Yeah.
What did you? We've sort of broached upon it a little bit, but I worked at the NME. I was on staff when you were kind of in full flight, and you were a much loved figure, like among staff. Like
Right.
you know, we played your records all the time, and there were people who you know just were big fans. What about that? But it's kind of weird. Like I've revisited a few people from that era on the podcast recently, and it's interesting hearing a perspective from someone else where they're kind of like, oh, actually, it was quite a spiteful time, or it was, I kind of feel quite damaged by things that
Mm.
happened or were said, or I guess I'm just interested in how you found it.
Um, I I now look back at that time and I feel no animosity at all. I actually think really I'm reaching the point where I realize how fun it was, really. And I can I think now I've kind of unpicked my personal uh damage and began to make amends with that. Like I as self-destruction and the kind of the dark side. Now I've made peace with the dark side of that period of time. I can actually start to see how much fun was had. Yeah, definitely.
Should we talk about something really important?
Yes, please.
What was the Kaneki video shoot like?
That was okay. So what do I remember about it? It was for the song Nightlife.
Yeah,
It was
the
14.
Merida Santiago classic.
Yeah, and I went to go to school, had an ET crop top in my bag that I'd bought from Kensington Market when it was open at the time, and in my school bag, and just turned at the gates and got on the tube and ended up there. And I think I'm in it for about maybe 2 or 3 seconds you can see me, but it meant everything. Like school was miserable, and that was like that was um the beginning of I felt like brilliant things happening in my life. Yeah.
I can't actually believe that era happened. If I'm being honest, like
Yeah.
it's so wild to me. I was thinking the other day. I mean, this is in my book, but there was this event. I interviewed I interviewed the Lovely Eggs for the podcast recently, and the girl from the Lovely Eggs was in that band Angelica, and they were teenagers at the time, and I was it got me thinking about this boat party. There was
Mhm.
this gig that was on a boat down the Thames, and I'm from way up north, and coming to London was just like walking through the wardrobe or something.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this. I was thinking about this gig, and it was so like I got there, and there were kids, just boys snogging boys, and girls snogging girls, and boys snogging girls who were snogging boys who were snogging girls,
I
and
think I know about that.
all the bands were just like shambolic but brilliant, and people were like vomiting overboard. I mean, it was just like so different to like the comprehensive school experience that I was having at the time. And I
Teensy
just
power.
TNC Power. This is exactly it. I haven't had this on this podcast yet, and they're like my favorite band. It's I
Yeah.
keep. Have you heard the new record?
No, I haven't. No.
It's really good. It's really good.
I would go into school as such a Abyss fan, and I would go into school, and although they'd only released like two 7 inches at that point, the Secret Vampire, what was it, that one?
Secret Vampire soundtrack. Yeah.
Secret Vampire. And I would go into school and I'd be like, yeah, I've actually been sent like a new demo by because I had a fanzine at that age as well.
What was your
um
fanzine called?
it was called Breeding the Different Race. Yeah.
Intense.
And I was like 13, 14, calling up record companies being like, hello, can you send me the new CD? But like it was, I think they must have um they might even remember because it went from doing a fanzine to like sending out demos when I was like 15 and stuff. So um but yeah, I was on like the press list for like 4AD, and at 13, 14, and did one issue, but kind of dined out on it for like two years, you know? So yeah, I'd be like, yeah, you know, I've been sent the new demo by Biss, like, and I just make up song titles by them. I just remember it specifically, like really just trying to seem like the person that knew everything about Teen C. Not that anyone at my school would cared, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm fairly certain that making up Biss song titles was what that band Dweeb did. And
Yes, I think so.
it's funny whenever I talk to Biss, I'm always like, because they've sort of become friends now, and I'll always be like, dweeb. And there's obviously part of them that's a little bit like it was like 25 years ago, James. You know what I mean? It's not like a beef anymore. I know you're still sort of in your bedroom cutting and pasting photocopied pages that you printed out at school. I'm pretty sure.
It
I'm
was
pretty.
it was a pretty strong tribal element. I remember there was, I think, one show at the Brixton Academy where it was, maybe it was garbage. No, there was one where Biss and Disco Pistol and Dweeb were all on the same lineup, and like the vitriol between, like, of course Biss had like the majority of the
Yeah.
fans, but like the segment, it was pretty rough, like down in the front. It was horrible to each other, definitely.
I
And to the
get.
band as well. I'm pretty sure things were thrown, but not by me, of course. But it
Yeah.
was like, it was pretty a fun time. Yeah.
I'm going to text Mira Manga from the
Yeah.
band Disco Pistol after this conversation and say that Disco Pistol got a shout out on the new
Of
episode of the
course.
podcast.
Yeah.
That might be a good place to leave it, Patrick.
Okay.
If you thank you so much for speaking to me, and I hope I haven't been too
Hey.
prying.
No,
Uh,
or like I want to go into this next chapter of my work. I know I don't want to be defensive about anything. I hope that didn't happen.
no, not at all.
There's just, I think I'm trying to work out how to set boundaries and not be defensive at the same time. And I think hopefully I'm veering to the boundary part, definitely.
Listen,
Yeah.
anytime you want to come back and chat, I'm
Thanks,
always here.
Jane. Okay. All right.
Gr-
Bye-bye.
Great to speak to you, man. Bye,
Thank
bye.
you. Good luck with the book. Bye.
Thanks, man. Cheers.